Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here, mediocre astrologer. Man, he's okay. Guys, today I just want to go over some basic astrology reading in the chart, um, just to clarify some things and make some points. Um, Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share. And also book a reading with me, macroastrology.com. That's my website, macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. Yeah, I highly encourage, if you haven't gotten a reading already, I highly encourage you to. You will greatly benefit from it. So, yes, let's get started. All right, so this is just the transits chart right now. Let's see. Yeah. All right. So I just want to go over some basic chart reading stuff. Let's pretend this is a natal chart. I'm not really doing mundane predictions right now. But let's start with the sun and the ascendant. Well, let's start with the ascendant. The ascendant's first. So ascendant in Virgo. So the ascendant, and I probably made these points before, but it's good to refresh, reiterate, if some people might have missed it. The ascendant is not the mask we wear, despite what a lot of people think. It's not the ego. Some people really, there's a lot of schizophrenia about the ascendant. On the one hand, people want to downplay it and be like, it's just the mask you wear. It's like your outer appearances. And then other people are like, yeah, but the sign that rules it rules the whole chart. It's weird. Like they would call Mercury the chart rule. It doesn't rule the chart. It's literally what it literally is the ascendant ruler. So let's just be clear. It doesn't rule everything. I mean, it's a false. And how we frame things, what we call things matters because it, filters into our subconscious and controls, and then it forms beliefs. This is all psychology, right? What you call something, how you term something, the names you use, the words you use matters because that informs our subconscious mind and sets up belief patterns and structures and conditionings. And so it's important. Just call it what it is, right? It's not ruling the whole chart. It's ruling the ascendant, right? And the ascendant, what the ascendant is this is the spin of the earth, right? If we go for minutes just to show, that's the earth spinning. It's fast forwarding it by minute. You can see here, that's the earth spinning. And so this line here, the ascendant, is where the eastern horizon meets the ecliptic, right? The ecliptic is the path of the sun, and all the planets follow the path of the sun, right? So essentially, for simplicity's sake, you could say the eastern horizon, but it represents the spin of the earth, and it's the closest we can get. There is no representation of the earth, but what we can get is the way the earth spins. It spins does it spin clockwise or counterclockwise? I'm kind of confused right now. It spins from east to west, so that would be clockwise if you're looking down on it, I guess. Anyway, from east to west. But yeah, so what it represents is the plane of the earth for us, practically speaking, because we live on the earth. We don't live on the sun. We don't live on the moon. We live on the earth, right? And we're always on the earth. The earth is constant. The earth doesn't go away at night like the sun. It doesn't go away during the day like the moon, right? It's not waxing and waning like the moon. The earth is constant. It's always here. It's our home. It's like our bed. If you want to know where your bed lies, it's at the ascendant, right? Because that's where we rise each morning, right? And it's where our feet touch the ground, right? So the ascendant is always constant, and it's our most personal sense of self, right? The earth where you live, your home, your hometown, your home, your actual home, your room, your bed, right? It doesn't get more personal than your bed. That's vastly different from the sun, right? The sun is gone at night. It comes back in the day. It's huge as far as the solar system is concerned, but personally, from our own personal perspective, our bed is vastly more personal to us. Like, I mean, there's no comparison, right? You want to say the bed is just the mask you wear? No. You want to say the home you live in, your hometown, your room, of course, I mean, we could say that the fourth represents that, but in a very personal sense, this is where we live, our ascendant, right? So it's our body, even, really, if you want to get down to it, our body, our head, our whole sense of self, our most personal sense of self, right? And when we interact with the world, we're talking about the sun. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. Ascendant and ascendant Lord represent the body, the self, the most personal sense of self, the deepest sense of self. And just to clarify that, just to put some polarity on that, if you're laying in bed in the middle of the night, it's a very different experience than being out in the world with your job, seeking fame and fortune or whatever you're doing. Not everyone's seeking fame and fortune, but I'm just using that as an example, right? So there's that disparity, that polarity, that when you're laying in bed on your own at night, in the middle of the night, you're really in touch with your ascendant, right? Because it's unadulterated. You don't have to be worldly. You don't have to put on your costume, your hey John, how you doing? You watch the game on Sunday? Whatever, stupid bullshit, right? I don't watch any games on Sunday. I don't watch sports, but that's besides the point. Anyway, you can really be yourself when you're alone in your bed in the middle of the night, about to go to bed, and you're just being completely yourself without any need to be pretentious, put on an act or anything. And not that the sun is an act, right? The sun is not an act, but the sun, what the sun represents is our connection to the world. It's our worldliness. When the sun rises, our sun sign comes out, right? You're going to operate with your sun sign at night anyway, as well, but you're really drawing on your moon sign for that. When you're going out to the clubs, we'll get to that, right? But your sun sign represents your worldliness. If a planet is conjunct your sun, this is going to be kind of representative of your ticket to one representative of your ticket to fame or fortune or worldliness, right? You're going to take that planet with you. The tighter the conjunction, the more powerful it is, right? The people talk about combust planets. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, even with the sun, tight conjunctions, which they call cazimi in when a planet is exactly conjunct the sun, it becomes very powerful. But it's the same with any tight conjunction. And I'm going to do a video about really tight exact conjunctions later. For instance, Venus and Juno, asteroid Juno right now. We'll talk about that. But in any case, so the sun is our worldliness. It's our being. It's our outward personality. It is huge, right? And eclipses everything else. And we sort of think like that's who we are because the sun is really, when the sun's shining, nothing else gets to shine. Nothing else takes the stage. Everything is hidden. It's only the sun, right? When the sun's out, there's nothing else. You don't see the planets. You rarely see the moon. I guess if they're far apart, you can sometimes see a little, hint of the moon. But you don't really see anything else, right? Maybe, sometime if it's sunset or sunrise, you could see, on the opposite horizon, you could see certain planets. But pretty much when the sun's out, you don't see anything else. It's eclipsing everything else. So superficially, it seems like we are the sun, especially when the sun's out, like when the sun's shining. But this is a mistake. It does represent the ego, plainly, because it's connected to Leo. It rules Leo, right? And Leo is all about ego and pride and, lots of things, creativity and the heart, generosity. It's very big-hearted. The sun is all these things, even in a more contracted way. So it does represent our ego and our pride and our creativity, right? All life comes from the sun, from the earth too, but without the sun, we could do away with some of these planets and life would still go on, but not without the sun. So the sun does rule a huge portion of creativity, right? Life is creative. If you can give life, that's a creation. That's the definition of creative. It's not just like, oh, how well can you, write a song or paint a, nice paint. That's an aspect of creativity, but creativity is really about creating life, creating something new, right? I just a tangent about that. If somebody paints a painting or writes a song and it's like other people are like, oh, it's crap, it doesn't work, right? That's like, there's no life in it. That's the equivalent, right? Like somebody gives birth and it's stillbirth, right? There's no life in it. that's like a bad painting, or a bad meal. Like you watch these cooking shows. I like watching cooking shows sometimes, and they're like, this doesn't work. What are they talking about? Well, there's no life. There's no life. There's no coherence. It's like a stillbirth, right? So life is essentially creativity. It's synonymous with creativity. So the sun is strongly connected to creativity and life, right? It's where we give life, and where we're very creative in the world. And fame and fortune as well are symbolized by the sun. So the sun can represent where you can get famous. Planets aspecting, or especially tightly conjunct, will also be tied to any fame, fortune, recognition that you have in this life. The sign obviously represents the flavor or the dignity, right? The house is more the experiential. Even though the sign deals with the experience, and there's a lot of overlap here, right? The sign delivers experience, and the house delivers experience. The sign flavors the planet, but the house does too. But if you want to separate them, the sign is more the flavoring, right? Like we're born with that flavor, like the sun in the flavor of Virgo, Mercury in the flavor of Virgo. Mercury and the sun are primary. The planet is primary, right? So if you have like sun conjunct Mercury, that's more of a factor than sun in Virgo and Mercury in Virgo, because they're conjunct. Why? I mean, 4 degrees, but it's still conjunction. Because these are two physical bodies. So the physical has to have more weight than the sign or the house, right? Just the fact that sun is conjunct Mercury has a lot of weight to it, right? Then secondarily, sign and house. And the house delivers experiences over time. So we learn from the house that we're in, right? It's sort of like the environment. And the sign is sort of like the flavoring. Is it a good flavor? Is it a bad flavor? Does it work well with the planet? Kind of like that. And then maybe like the aspects could be like, different additional flavoring, secondary flavorings, right? Like sun trine Jupiter right now. That's generally good. But then you also want to look at how do these planets influence the sign. So like Jupiter's in Taurus, but if it's trine the sun in Virgo, how does Jupiter influence Virgo? Well, not that well, right? Jupiter is domicile in Pisces and in detriment in Virgo. So that's a trine. It's good. It's Jupiter. Jupiter is a benefic, but it's not the best trine because Jupiter doesn't do that well in Virgo. And so what this would be good for is when a planet is not in good dignity in a sign or in an aspect, it's a very narrow focus. So it's good for Virgo things, right? Virgo is very analytical, intellectual, academic, hardworking, aggressive, health-minded, good for writing, very critical. So Jupiter would help with the Virgo quality. It would expand all the Virgo elements, but it's not going to be so good for Jupiterian high-minded philosophy, right? As far as this Sun Mercury combination. It's okay in Taurus. It's neutral. I like it. I have it in Taurus. It's my Jupiter return, by the way. Probably said that before. But anyway, then you could look at the reverse. How does Sun do in Taurus? How is Sun affecting Jupiter in Taurus? Well, Jupiter and Sun also, they expand. So Jupiter expands the Sun. So Jupiter expands the ego, expands the confidence. These people can be extremely confident, sometimes overly confident, sometimes very arrogant or cocky, but not always. Depends on the combination, right? How expressive they are of it. But they're going to feel confident, and it's going to expand the ego a lot. There's no combustion when it's when it's not conjunct, right? So Sun trine Jupiter does not have any of the combustion aspects the way it would with the Mercury. And Sun in Taurus is it's fine. It's very creative, very beautiful, oriented, good for singing, good for money, good for lots of things, for nature, sensory stuff, things like that, right? So you want to look at that. now the combustion aspect, what it does is that it makes the person, the bulk of their personality, the sun sign, very mercurial, right? These people are going to be very thinking, long thinking, right? Active, very active mind. But then they can suffer from burnout. That's the combustion aspect. They can become very irritable at times, annoyed. Sometimes, like if they're in burnout, their mind won't work right, so they need to chill out, cool down, take a breather, calm down. But also they can, like I said, Mercury can be something that they become well known for, because the sun is our sort of ticket to fame and fortune. Not the only one, but right, it is a big indicator of where you can shine. The sun is literally where we shine, right? So it's very strong. Anything is strong on the angles, right? AC/DC, MCIC. Yeah. Sun obviously likes the 5th house as well. It's great in the 10th house, and it's our ambitions as well. It's good in the water houses, because the water houses are dark. So the sun being very bright, I mean, it's the brightest thing in the whole solar system. It's the sun, it's a star. It can light up that area, right? So I have sun in the 8th house. That's why I can illuminate 8th house topics like astrology, right? I could shine the light on them in another place that's otherwise very dark and hidden and mysterious. So yeah. And then the ascendant lord is like literally the self. The retrograde, you also want to pay attention to retrogrades. Is the ascendant lord retrograde, or are there retrogrades on or near the ascendant, either from the 12th or the 1st? Because that's going to be very significant. If there's no retrogrades, the person is going to be much more agreeable, and that's good and bad, and I'll tell you why. On the good side, they're much more open to helpful suggestions, right? And if you're talking about like working with a person's mind, their subconscious, this would also be true, especially when we're talking about subconscious, of the 12th lord and planets in the 12th house, as well as the 2nd house, because these are all self houses. 2nd house would be self-worth, right? Which translates literally into how much money you can make. If you don't think you're worth anything, you're not going to make any money, right? But so mainly we're just, just for simplicity's sake, we'll stick to the ascendant. If a planet's retrograde, these people are going to be, sidetrack. If it's direct, they're going to be much more agreeable, much more open to suggestion, both good and bad, right? So if you say, okay, buddy, you really need to change because you're not doing things right, and they have no retrogrades in the 1st house or near the ascendant, and their ascendant lord is direct, they're going to hear you out. They're going to be like, okay, you know what? Maybe I do need to change. All right, this makes sense. You're an authority. I believe you. You've written all these books. You got your PhD, whatever. Just some believable person. I guess you probably know what you're talking about. All right, I'm going to do what you say, and yeah, that person will probably receive positive results if the advice is good. On the negative hand, Dr. Fauci and CNN and come along and say, oh, you got to wear 5 masks and get 10 boosters, whatever, right? They're going to be like, oh, I have to, because that's their authorities, So it can work both ways, both positive and negative. The retrograde person, either, like I said, near the ascendant from the 12th or in the 1st house, or the ascendant lord being retrograde, they're going to be resistant. Fauci, CNN, NBC, all the news, all the doctors, all the authorities, all the mainstream ones are like, do this, do that. And retrograde's like, I really think I should do my own research on this. I'm questioning you. I don't think you're really, I don't know. I have to do my own homework. I can't just believe you, because it just doesn't make sense to me. So the retrograde is going to be a lot more resistance. It's going to be a lot more doubting. It's going to be a lot more questioning. This is true wherever a retrograde is and whatever house it rules, specifically mainly for the 1st house, but also the 12th and 2nd, right? Planets in or ruling those houses. Those people are going to be much more resistant to bad advice, to any advice, right? Even good advice, right? Like if they have a negative self-complex, maybe they were traumatized or abused or when they're a child and they developed a very negative conditioning. They could go to seek therapy, probably you could probably have to force them. you know, you could have like the top doctors, the most helpful people, and they're gonna be like, look, here's your problem. You are abused, you have all this negative self conditioning, and you know, you have to work, you have to do the work to change it. These people are going to be so resistant to even to good advice. Like, no, you don't understand. Like, this mind is not going to change. I'm not good enough. I am damaged goods, and I don't believe you. You're full of shit. You probably just want money, and no, it doesn't work for me. It works for some people, but no, I tried it. I did it. They're going to have endless excuses, and they're going to be so resistant to change. That's the retrogrades. It really takes a lot to get their whole being toward working towards something helpful, because even if they try something, they're going to revert back to old behavior, because that's the retrograde, right? I have it, by the way. I have it in the first, 12th, and second. So I'm like, you know, full. I really get the resistance of the retrogrades. Even with this YouTube channel, it took me a year, 3 years basically, to gain enough confidence to where I feel okay doing it, because I'm always like, I'll do it for a while, then I'm like, I don't know, this is not for me. I don't feel good about it. You know, I'm just gonna drop it. That's the retrograde in action. It's always gonna pull you back, right? So even if you, it's definitely the 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of dance. It's like a tango or something. Anyway, I don't know. But yeah, that's the retrograde. So that's something to be mindful of. Now the moon is our heart, it's our emotions, obviously a mother, you know, son's father. Sun is also government related, can be, because that, you know, government has this sort of, obviously there could be ties to Saturn as well when we're talking about government, and father as well. So sun can be, you know, these are 2 interchangeable figures for planets for sun, for father. But moon usually relates to mother, home. And I suppose sometimes if there is no mother, or the father's playing the role, the home person, the person at home taking care of the kids, that then the moon might represent the mother generally, or the father. Generally, moon represents mother, and it represents our heart satisfaction, and it has a kinship to Venus, because these are both what we love in different ways. The moon is what we love in a very deep, satisfying way, right? Like a soulful way, like, oh my god, I feel so satisfied by life, deeply content, right? That's the moon. That's what makes us deeply satisfied. The Venus is what we really enjoy on a sensorial level, like, oh, I love this kind of music, and I love eating ice cream or drinking beers and smoking cigarettes, whatever it is, right? And having sex, and it's very sensorial. So it's like what we love on a more sensorial way. Like, the moon is our deepest sense of satisfaction. And the moon is also our second most personal aspect besides the ascendant. You know, the ascendant, you know, above all, be true to thyself. Something, not saying something like that. That would be really talking about the ascendant, right? And then secondary, it would be moon. So we want these to be satisfied, and you can look at the relationship between sun, moon, and ascendant lord. Are they united, or are they really divided? And that's going to represent the internal conflicts, a big bulk of how conflicted we are inside. And one of the struggles about finding our purpose in life, our path in life, is finding the thing that satisfies our sun, moon, and ascendant lord. And then, you know, maybe the dispositor of the sun and moon, the MC lord, right? Or very strong, you know, conjunctions and conglomerations of planets, stelliums. I hate that word, because everyone thinks it's like some sort of badge of honor. They go around, I have a stellium, right? It's stupid. Like, it doesn't mean very much, because it could be like, you know, people have all sorts of definitions, and there's no real consistent definition. So I hate that word stellium. It's just so, you know, noobs just love to say, I have a stellium, right? So does this qualify as a stellium? Oh, like they really want to be able to say I have a stellium for some reason. I don't know why. It's stupid, right? astrology is not here to glorify your ego, right? It's here to for you to understand yourself. So drop the word stellium. It's much better to say, I have 4 planets in this sign, in this house, and these are the degrees, you know, or better yet, this is what my whole chart looks like. Just drop stellium. Who cares? Like, it's shorthand that people just corrupted. Anyway, pet peeve. What was I saying? Yeah, moon. Yeah, so the relationship between, you want to look how to satisfy the big 3, but then also the, you know, anything really important like tight conjunctions, you know, multiple planets in a house or sign, things like that. So that's the challenge, right? And there's no easy answer. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Yeah, then yeah, like I said, Venus can often represent women, especially for men. It could be like the girlfriend. Obviously, house rulership is going to be very important. Um, Mars is male aggression. Mars is like the counterpart to Venus, and you want to look at the relationship between Mars and Venus, because that'll tell about a person's attractiveness, sexuality, not necessarily physical attractiveness. That will be more representative of the ascendant. I did a whole video on it. It gets a lot more complicated than that. It's not just the ascendant, but Mars and Venus together represent a person's like physicality. If they're in good aspect, the person a lot of times can be very you know, good at, you know, sports, working out, develop a really good physique. They might be very sexual or sensual, right? They might be very like hot-blooded, right? Very attractive in a certain way. Even if they're not physically attractive, especially when they're young, they're going to have a certain sensuality, sexuality, good attraction, Mars Venus combinations, right? Healthy, you know, good aspect. If they're not good aspect, then the person might not have those qualities. They might not be very physically capable. They might not have a lot of sensuality or passion, you know, especially as it relates to other people. There's so many combinations. I'm not going to go through all of them. Let's keep going. Mercury. Okay, so Mercury represents the intellect and communication, obviously. Mercury's very fast moving. Jupiter is our philosophy. I mean, I don't want to be redundant. I'm trying to think about things that are not as obvious. I mean, Jupiter's our abundance. It's also the teacher and where we experience the best luck, but Jupiter can be very excessive as well. Venus is not always good either. Venus can be very indulgent. And a person with a strong Venus and weak Sun can be they might think that, you know, life is just about sensory indulgence, right? Like Aleister Crowley. And that's not to say that anyone with a strong Venus and weak Sun is going to necessarily lean fully into that side of things where they're just like, do whatever you want and just it's all about indulging yourself to the max, which is basically, you know, the root of Satanism, because it's just like ego gratification, right? That's what the Satanists, they want to, as individual egos, they want to be as gods, which is the height of egotism, not Satanism, right? That's all it really is. They create this figure of Satan in their minds. There's no actual Satan. It's their creation. That's one of the things about magic. It works with the belief system, what you put energy towards, right? And they convince the masses to believe in certain things as part of their magic. It's all about belief, right? And belief is creation. So yeah, Venus can be very indulgent. Mercury, one of the problems with Mercury is that I don't want to say problems, but if Mercury's afflicted, it can affect the mind. You know, it can make a person crazy if it's in really bad dignity. Jupiter can make a person fat. very big, very Jupiter can make a really expand the ego to enormous heights. Like I said before, like Sun conjunct Jupiter in certain signs, like say Gemini and certain individuals like Kanye West. He's a good example. I mean, he's just a really obvious example, and that's because Gemini loves to exaggerate, express themselves. So it's not that other people don't have egos as big as Kanye West. It's just that he's very vocal about it because, Sun, Jupiter, Gemini, right? Or Jupiter, Mars, and Andrew Tate. I forget what sign it is. Maybe it's like Sagittarius or something like that. But like Jupiter's expanding that Mars male aggressiveness, right? That people call like toxic masculinity. That's more like a Jupiter Mars combination, right? So that's really interesting. What else? Saturn, Saturn has these two sides to it. One is limitation and fear and doubt and insecurity, and restriction, and it's like a brick wall. If you can climb that brick wall and get to the other side, there's probably gonna be more brick walls, but once you figure out the game, it's really the game's over. Some people actually never overcome their Saturn. They never get up the courage to climb over that brick wall, and their whole life they just build a very heavy sort of negative conditioning that I can't do this wherever their Saturn is, right? Wherever their Saturn lies and whatever house and sign and aspects. I can't do this. No, I'm just not good enough for that. But if you have like plenty of fire and confidence, right, and you overcome the Saturnian limitation, then you gain the confidence and you gain tremendous authority, right? Saturn can be authority, and Saturn can be mastery, and Saturn can endure long time, right? So the trick to having a healthy, good Saturn is to overcome the fears wherever it stands and wherever it lies. And if it's retrograde, it's probably going to be harder, right? Because the retrograde again is more doubting and questioning and resisting, right? So whatever you have in retrograde, it's going to have that ability to it's going to be more resistant to change, right? Both inner and outer. And also Saturn retrograde is for the law and authority, you're going to be much more resistant to that. Like you're not going to, these can be more likely to break the law, right? Or disregard the law, disregard convention, disregard authority. Kachi says, what? Who gives a fuck, right? Saturn retrograde. The law is this. I don't want to get arrested, but I'm gonna not do it as much as I, can get away with, right? Obviously, if Saturn's retrograde. So that's the double side. I love retrogrades personally because unless you're an artist and you need that flow, like if you're gonna be a rapper or a guitarist or a painter, probably having no retrogrades will work in your favor because it'll make you smooth as butter. Or if you want to be a good salesman, right? Or a good motivational speaker. Well, motivational speakers need to be more nuanced. So I would say have some retrogrades, right? Just maybe not too many. Anyway, you can always tell somebody has retrogrades because they're going to constantly stop themselves and go back and change. And like, it's going to be choppy, right? Their speech is going to be choppy. You can tell I have some retrogrades that are personal, right? First, second, 12th. Because I'm constantly reverting back, correcting myself. I'm a bit choppy. I'm not super smooth with my delivery. That's a lot of that has to do with retrogrades. We have a lot of retrogrades right now, and people think retrogrades are bad in general and they're life stops. And I mean, that may be true, but retrogrades are great for internal work and self-correcting and refining and developing. So, I mean, I don't mind retrogrades at all. I like retrogrades because they show that somebody's questioning and doubting and really thinking and mulling over things and self-correcting and rewriting, redoing, rethinking, reevaluating. Just the word is retrograde, right? Retro, same thing. Everything is retrograde. So Saturn, wherever Saturn lies, you're going to have to face that fear and climb that wall. And then just once you do it once, you're going to be like, okay, well, I did it once, I can do it again. Right. So you're going to have to keep doing that, but it'll get easier and better over time. At least perception wise, because you've done it. right? It's like, oh yeah, the wall. I got to do that again. Eventually, it won't be a big deal, right? You'll grow bigger than the walls. Let's see, Uranus. Uranus, I love Uranus because it's the planet of awareness, awakeness. One of the things people don't understand about Uranus is its relation to social and political issues. People forget this. They skip this often. Like even like really well-known astrologers, they won't talk about that aspect. I don't know why. Like maybe because it's not written in books, and maybe because you have to forget about the books and look at charts with an open mind. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, like, that's my retrogrades in action. Like, I don't give a shit what the books say. I look at what a person is and what their chart says, and I compare the two, and that's how I learn, right? Uranus 100% deals with politics, social issues, very big-minded. It's the outer space view of the Earth. You know, if Jupiter is the 30,000-foot view, Uranus is the outer space view, right? It's not very personal. It's not sexual. It's not, you know, it's really not like a warm planet, but none of the, well, Neptune is, I guess. Neptune's a warm outer planet, but Uranus is not. Uranus is very intellectual. It's a very thunderous. It's related to awakening, awareness, enlightenment, drum, like rhythm, some music, sometimes comedy because it's very shocking and sudden, spontaneous, and you know, hits that funny bone, right? It can relate to accidents and trauma. And again, retrograde is going to be a lot more challenging, a lot more independent, but really unique because Uranus Uranus direct will like to belong to like the rebel class, the group of revolutionaries. Uranus retrograde is not going to want to belong even to the revolutionaries. Like it's gonna, fuck that, you know, I'm just doing my own thing. I'm completely independent, right? Okay, so if you have Uranus retrograde somewhere in your chart, that's going to be where you are extremely independent, right? Jupiter retrograde will be independent from religion, right? Either you're going to be irreligious. Most people with Jupiter retrograde are not religious at all, right? Or they're going to be religious in an unorthodox way. And just think about Mel Gibson, right? He's ultra orthodox. He's ultra religious, right? He's more religious than religious. He's not conventionally religious, but he's extremely religious, right? So yeah, that could happen as well. Mars retrograde. So I didn't go over all the retrograde. Mars retrograde is going to be a bit more fighty, angry, physically resistant, right? So they're going to have that more aggressive Martian edge. Mercury retrograde is going to be more disagreeable, more mouthy. They're just going to be reluctant to sort of, you know, their first instinct is going to be nuh-uh. Like somebody says something, they're like nuh-uh, nuh-uh. They're going to want to argue more. You know, they're going to be more doubting and long thinking, right? Venus retrograde is going to have a very unique sense of style and fashion and taste. They're going to like things that other people don't like. They might be a lot more concerned with how they look because it's retrograde. Or, you know, do I look okay? Do I look okay? Am I okay? You know, especially a woman, right? You know, Mars retrograde could be for the man. It could be like, are my muscles, you know, do I have enough muscles today? Right. Stuff like that. Do I look manly enough? Anyway. What else? Chiron. People are confused about Chiron, and I go off about this all the time. Chiron is not merely the wounded healer. Chiron represents something extremely unique and different. And if you look at what Chiron is, it's like this. It defies definition. It's somewhere in between an asteroid, a dwarf planet, and a comet, because it even has like a coma, like a tail. And it orbits between Saturn and Uranus. So it has some kind of, I would say, Uranian quality or Aquarian quality, right? In between Saturn and Aquarius, right? That it's picking up on this. Some people say it's related to Virgo, because of the healing aspect. I think that's a misinterpretation, because what Chiron really represents, like what I call a Chiron, I don't know if this, I don't think this is a word. I think this is a word I'm attributing, like I'm coining it. A Chiron is somebody who just defies definition, right? That's what I call a Chiron, right? A good example would be like Grace Kelly, who has North Node and Chiron in the seventh, and she married a prince. The prince is a Chiron, one of a kind, right? Prince of Monaco, right? It's just completely. How many princes of Monaco are there? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. Maybe there's two. I don't know, but maybe there's just one at that time, right? But it's like 1 in 8 billion, right? Um, that's a Chiron, something completely unique and different. The problem with Chiron is that when you're so different, if it's aspecting, if it's conjuncting a certain planet or aspecting with a certain planet, it can make you feel so different that you don't accept it yourself. You reject that part of yourself. A lot of times people reject their own Chiron within themselves, like whether it's conjunct the Mercury, their sun, whatever. So they don't embrace their uniqueness. They do not embrace their Chironic nature. And so they reject themselves before other people reject them, because that's the fear that other people will reject them. And sometimes, especially with bad aspects to Chiron, they do suffer rejection. If it's conjunct the, if it's anything to do with like the sun or the ascendant lord, it can actually affect appearances, right? They can have wounds or deformities, right? But sometimes it can just be rejection by friends, rejection by society, bad aspects to Chiron. Then there's wounds naturally because of the rejection, because Chiron is a Chiron, a one of a kind, something so unique. People often don't like things that are so unique, and it's very Uranian in that sense, right? But Chiron also, where Chiron shines is when people, number one, when people embrace their Chiron. So similar to Saturn, there is like that wall with Chiron where it's not the wall of limitation and restriction and fear and doubt, but it's similar because you have to embrace your Chiron. You have to embrace your uniqueness, your difference, your one of a kindness. And if it's retrograde, it's going to be more difficult, right? It's going to be much harder to embrace that because it's just you're going to be resistant towards yourself and towards others, right? There's going to be a lot more challenge there. Once you embrace that, Chiron can be incredibly creative because of its uniqueness, and uniqueness stands out. It makes you shine. One of the things about people, famous people, like people who really make it on their own, not like people who are just like, married into a wealthy family or stuff like that, but people who get somewhere with their own creativity. And creativity is a very broad term. I'm not just talking about like musicians and artists, although it could be, right? Creative in the biggest sense, could be businessmen too. They have to be creative. Chiron can really shine in that sense because you're unique, and then you stand out, and then you can rise above the rest with a Chiron that you yourself embrace. Similar to Saturn, you have to climb that wall. You have to overcome that self-doubt, that self-negativity about your own uniqueness, right? You have to embrace your own Chiron. Then it could be an incredible asset. And many, I've seen this again and again and again. Creative individuals have a prominent Chiron that they have learned to use to their benefit. If it's a wounded Chiron, then you have to learn to heal it. That's where the heal it, wounded healer archetype comes in with but that's like square to Pluto or something. It's not square. The nodes are a little more square to Pluto. But if, let's say, Chiron was square to Pluto, then there could be abuse because you're different. Like, somebody's very different, then they become bullied because of their uniqueness, because they're one of a kind, because they're different. That's a real challenge. And that's where Chiron becomes the wounded healer. You have to heal those wounds, and then you can heal others, obviously. Chiron, in its very evolved potential, is a teacher, a shaman, a mystic, a healer, a wise man, even an astrologer, right? So Chiron does have very high potential. It's an outer planet. It's moving from Saturn to Uranus. So it's the, I think some people call it the Rainbow Bridge, whatever, right? I don't know why it has to be rainbow, but It's that connection where Saturn's sort of like the physical limitation, Chiron's transcending that physical limitation, moving towards Uranus, towards awakening, right? If you can embrace your uniqueness, your individuality, you're on your way to enlightenment, right? I mean, how poetic is that, right? I mean, that's, the meaning of life is written in our solar system, amazingly, somehow. I mean, there's magic in these planets. There really is. So you have to embrace your total individuality. That's a prerequisite to enlightenment. Nobody comes enlightened being part of the group. You're not one with the tribe, and then you become awakened. You have to become an individual first before you become enlightened, and that's Chiron. Chiron is embracing our Chiron is truly embracing our individuality, right? And look at your own chart. Is it retrograde or direct? If it's retrograde, you have a little more work to do. If it's direct, it's going to be a little bit easier, right? But don't pat yourself on the back if it's direct, because maybe you just haven't reached the phase where you have to deal with a retrograde Chiron, with a bad aspect. That's going to be a lot. That might, it's all karmic. We get what we need, right? Any case, Neptune. Neptune obviously deals a lot with like creativity, fantasy, delusion, the subconscious mind, film, photography, arts, lies, deception, drugs, alcohol, things of that, all kinds of manifestations like that. When it's in Pisces, we're getting like, oh my gosh, anything goes with Neptune and Pisces. Really, it's like people are like, I'm a cat, and if I identify as a cat, you have to call me a cat. Whatever. I don't know. All kind of crazy stuff, right? It's fantasy is more real than reality, right? It's whatever you imagine is the reality with Neptune. Similarly, Pisces has that quality too. It can be very psychic. Don't get me wrong. There's many. That's just sort of the lower manifestation of Pisces. It's not a very evolved manifestation of Pisces to be completely delusional, right? To believe that fantasy is reality. That's not a high level of Pisces. High level of Pisces is true, mysticism, connection to the spiritual realms, being completely in touch with the subconscious, your own subconscious, being highly creative. But at the same time, having your feet on the ground, not being deluded that you're creative, like you're whatever you're imagining is reality. No, you need that separation. In Pisces, there's no separation between truth and lies. So people can take lies as truth. And that's the problem with Neptune, Pisces as well. When it's retrograde, then you're being more independent with your visions, right? So people with Neptune retrograde are going to have a very different vision from the conventional. Like, oh, what's your dream? Neptune retrograde. My dream is completely, unique. Like, oh, I never heard of that one. That's like, Neptune prograde will direct will be, conventional vision, conventional creativity, right? They're going to have a very normal sense of imagination. It might be good. It's not saying it's not good, but it's going to be much more open to the conventions of society, what everyone else is doing. When it's retrograde, they're going to have a very unique vision that's all their own, and it's not going to go along with the masses. It's not going to be heavily conditioned by, it might be negatively conditioned, but it's not going to be heavily conditioned by what everyone else is doing. And the Neptune retrograde is going to be a lot more resistant to change. Same with any retrograde, and it depends where it is. But wherever Neptune is, you can work with imagination very well wherever your Neptune is. For instance, I have Neptune in the second house, and if you're just very passive with Neptune in the second house, Neptune's kind of going to lose everything. Like, so give away all your possessions. That's very Neptunian. Oh, I don't know how. Like, I had a like $10,000, and I don't know where it went. It's all gone, right? That's like Neptune in the second house. But if you work with it consciously, Neptune can create. It's very creative, Neptune, because it's a very powerful imagination, right? So self-worth, you're going to have to build your self-worth with Neptune in the second house. And if it's retrograde, it's going to be more difficult. It's going to be resistant, but still, there's that potential. You have to build up your self-worth, or if it's in the first or 12th, wherever it is, right? However you're using it, then you work with it. You use your imagination, you use your vision to create what you want. Be conscious with your Neptune in your Neptunian placement. It can really, you can be very proactive with Neptune, is what I'm trying to say. Be proactive, use your imagination, use your vision to create what you want wherever your Neptune is and whatever houses it rules, right? It's going to rule the Pisces house, the co-rule the Pisces house. So yeah, that's a very positive usage of Neptune, because otherwise it can just be like, just, you know, create fantasy, delusion, loss. Neptune's related to loss. You lose things with Neptune, but you can gain things with Neptune, but you have to work with it. You have to be proactive. It's very expansive, so you have to be contractive and proactive, right? Gather that Neptune and mold it like clay. That's what you want to do with your Neptune. Now, Pluto is the most powerful planet, and Pluto is incredibly destructive, but incredibly powerful at the same time. And a Pluto retrograde is going to be much more difficult to work with, and it's going to show a very independent spirit, right? Deep within, and psychology might be like very unique, right? A person's psychology. And Pluto, depending on where it is, can cause abuse, which can lead to trauma. Uranus is the symbol of trauma and accidents, but Pluto is abusive, and it's where somebody wants to control you in a very negative way. Not always, but you see it with hard aspects, right? You know, we have it was more square the nodes before, but it's still somewhat square the nodes. That's not very good. It's in the, you know, 5th house here, so I don't know. Friends, entertainment, games. I don't know. There may be like you know, schoolyard. There was a bully, right? That's like a 5th house Pluto, and it's just traumatized you, like beat you, took your lunch money every day, beat you up, and all sorts, and you never got over it, right? Pluto in the 5th house. You know, square series. I don't know what to make of that. Some issue with loss, mother, or food, or something. But anyway, I don't. Anyway, well, I'll talk about the asteroids. Yeah, Pluto in bad aspect can be really, really devastating. Sexual abuse could be psychological abuse, gaslighting, verbal abuse, all different kinds of abuse. You know, somebody in Capricorn, it will be somebody who's in authority, just way too heavy-handed. Where have we heard that one before? Couldn't be what any of the governments have been doing these past few years. No, nothing like that. They've not been traumatizing people with their abusive overreach of power or anything like that. No. But anyway, wherever your Pluto is, you also have to heavily work with and pay attention to, because it's psychology and it's strategy and it's mastermind, and it's very destructive. So you want to keep that Pluto clean. Like, for instance, I have Pluto in the 12th. That's one of the most difficult placements, but also one of the most empowering. I can tell you, when I'm really on top of my Pluto, my subconscious is working in my favor to such a powerful degree. Problem is, I retrograde. I go back and I drop the ball and I forget, and I become very negative, because Pluto can be very negative. But when it's empowered, it's such a wonderful asset. Like a healed Pluto, a healthy Pluto. If you've gotten over whatever abuses, traumas you have from Pluto, and you work with your Pluto, it can be the strongest area in your chart for development, for growth, for you know, strategy, for winning in life, because Pluto has so much weight and power to it. It's the slowest moving planet, main planet. No, I mean, like, there's like Sedna is a dwarf planet outside. So is Eris. Eris and Sedna are very slow moving, but they're not as influential as Pluto. Pluto has a special karma with the Earth. It's also the right size. It's big enough. I think it's bigger than either of those dwarf planets. And it also has Chiron, which is the moon, or Charon. And they're almost the same size, and they're doing this twisting, dancing motion. Um, so yeah, wherever your Pluto is, you want to have that area be as clean and healthy as possible. Pay special attention to it, because otherwise it's going to wreak havoc. It's going to cause destructive behaviors. Really the most destructive. Pluto's the most destructive, right? And so yeah, you want to work with it and use it to your advantage. Psychology is how you work with Pluto, right? You want to become master of your own psychology. You don't want your conditioned psychology to run you, which is what most people do, by the way, right? They let their conditioned psychology run them because they think life is outside of themselves. That's the great mistake. When you think life is out here, when it's not really in here. That's what we don't realize. It's life is an inside job. All our enemies are internal. All our challenges and difficulties and struggles are internal. But all day long, I see in astrology circles, or every circle, people are saying, life's not working out for me. I have all these difficulties. I'm so sad. I want to kill myself. When will it end? And believe me, I was like that. I was a victim of that mentality for a long time. I'm not anymore. I've greatly empowered myself this past year, really. So I'm not a victim. I've taken ownership of everything in my life. It's completely possible for you as well. And the way to do that is to realize that it's all an inside job. Happiness is an inside job. Defeating all your enemies is an inside job. Overcoming all your challenges is an inside job. It's all inside. It's all internal, 100%. And I'm not the only one to say that. All the great people, all the most successful people who really understood how to create positive, healthy mindset to win at life, they all understood this too. And they say the same things. It's all about your mindset. So you want to become master of your own psychology and your own conditioning. Things will not go in your favor until you change your attitude, until you change your psychology, until you change your mindset, right? Until you decide to take ownership and to stop blaming external things. Because as long as you put the blame on something outside of yourself, you're disempowered. You're not going to change it. You're just going to be a victim. And do you want to be a victim your whole life? A poor, crying, whiny victim who suffers and who's, blaming somebody else? That sucks, right? It sucks. It's so disempowering. It's so weak. It's so pathetic. It's so immature. It's so childish. I get it. Things happen that are not our fault. We still have to take responsibility, right? And that's where the Pluto comes in. It's hard. It's not easy. If your Pluto is retrograde, it's even more hard. You're more independent. You're more rebellious. You're going to be more, resistant to what other people say, both positive and negative. And you're going to be resistant to, your own efforts of changing. Your psychology is going to be, unique and questioning and doubting. And that's a good quality. It's a more advanced quality. It's like a higher calling, right? If you have retrograde outer planets. But you have to know this, and you have to put in a bit more effort. It's not going to be as easy if you have direct planets. You're going to be much more, you can say like if your planets are direct, you can say like affirmations, and you're going to see results right away. You're just going to be like, I love myself. I'm so good. And you're like, oh, wow. Like I'm all better now. I'm joking. It's not that easy, but, it's going to be easier if it's not retrograde. You're going to have to you're going to revert back, retro, right? The re thing. You're going to return, retrograde back on yourself again and again and again, but you got to keep pushing. Pretend you're at the gym lifting weights. You got to lift the weights in your mind, right? And that's a very Plutonic thing. Healing is not easy, but it's worth it, because the inverse is true. However much you're wounded, if you look at a curve, like I was wounded this much. Well, once you heal, you're going to have an advantage that is the inverse of your wound. It's going to be that much, right? You're going to have that much growth versus the negative wound that you had, right? So if you're really damaged, you can have incredible growth from that damage. from that abuse, from that trauma, right? And I'm not just talking about out my ass. I was, traumatized as a child. A lot of you know that. My brother was hit by a train and killed when I was 10. He was 12. We were close. We were brothers, That was deeply, deeply traumatizing. What was even arguably worse is that it just went ignored for like decades. Like I was basically told that, that's it. That's it. Nothing else to do. Just keep going on with your life. You're fine. You're good. Don't worry about it. I wasn't even told that. I was told nothing, right? My parents, it's not their fault. They didn't know any better, but that's the way it was, right? Nobody knew. That's the way things were back then. Nobody knew. It's just like if bad shit happened, you just keep going. You don't deal with it. So it festered and it set me back decades, and it was incredibly hard to deal with, but I had to. It was like that or like kill myself, right? Or be homeless, right? Homeless drug addict, homeless alcoholic, basically, is where I was headed. So yeah, and then like my girlfriend dumped me for another guy and then died a year later, and I never had closure. So I do have, I'm not talking about my ass. I do have issues. I know what it's like to have to take ownership of and I have other issues where I don't want to get into it, but like definitely huge blame and resentment at times for things that happened in my life or didn't happen with my parents and grandparents, that I've had to again take ownership, and it's not easy, but I'm just saying all this to tell you that I get it. I deeply get it, that we have abuse and trauma and pain and accidents that are not our fault, that are very, very difficult to face. But this is what astrology is for, right? It's not for your ego gratification. It's really to learn about yourself. This is a map of your mind. And if you understand it, then you can understand your situation and you can work with it, and you can stop blaming yourself. You can stop blaming others. You can stop blame altogether. You can use this map of your mind to empower yourself and to realize where you need to go and what you're good at, and what you're not good at, and play to your strengths and overcome your weaknesses and challenges. Now, a few notes on asteroids, which that's another thing. Like people are obsessed with asteroids and like, what do they mean? What do they mean? Primary thing that asteroids mean, number one thing that all asteroids mean is that they are a physical body in the sky. That's number one. So Ceres, Juno, Vesta, Sedna, these have different orbits, and that also plays a part. But what we can say, regardless of their names or the mythology that's associated with them, which does play a role, primary thing, Eris, is that these are bodies in the sky, right? They're smaller bodies. The main planets are larger bodies, right? And then these are smaller bodies. Secondary is their name and their mythology. And even before that, secondary after the bodies in the sky is what's their orbit and size, right? Because their orbit's going to determine how fast they are. The slower they are, the more spiritual effect they have. Like Sedna has a very, very slow orbit because it's very far out there. Did Sedna just move into Gemini? I'm just noticing that right now. Hold on, guys. When did Sedna move into Gemini? Yeah, it just did. It just June 9th. I was not paying attention. Wow. So that actually is a major shift in society. June 16th. I don't know the day, but anyway. In June, Sedna moved into Gemini. That's major. That's a major shift because it's so slow. It's such a slow moving planet. It's slower than Pluto. And Sedna has a spiritual significance. But main thing is that it's this big body. Not as big as I think it's a dwarf planet. And it's way out there. It moves very slow. So it changed some. So yeah. So the significance is that if you have an asteroid conjunct, like let's say Venus conjunct Juno, I don't really care so much that people associate it with marriage. I've never seen it really do anything related to marriage. Maybe some people have. Main thing is though, is that it's an asteroid and it's conjunct Venus, and Venus is a planet. So it's emphasizing Venus. If this is in somebody's birth chart, then there could be something extra special, a little extra special accent on Venus. Like, so Venus is more impactful for them. You know, it's going to be a little bit more, it's going to have a little bit more weight, right? That's the main significance. That's number one. And don't let the mythology outshine the fact that it's a body, it's a physical body conjunct planet Venus, right? That's the main thing. So that's how I look at asteroids. Like, Vesta, the Vestal versions, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Like, that's a minor point. The point is that Vesta is an asteroid. It's a physical body. You know, things like Lilith. Lilith primarily relates to the orbit of the moon. That's its main significance. It's not a planet, right? It's not a physical body. So, you know, people attach all those kinds of meanings to Lilith. I question it. I haven't seen it. I've seen it work, but I've also seen it not work. But, you know, everything's going to work sometimes, you know, right? So what it really means is when Lilith, let's put it on here. When Lilith is conjunct the moon, that's a far moon. When Lilith is opposite the moon, that's a near moon. So it represents the elliptical orbit of the moon. The moon is not circular. It does not travel in a circular orbit. It's elliptical. So when it's closer to the Earth, Lilith will be opposite, and then you'll see a big supermoon. Like if it's a full moon where Lilith is opposite, you'll see a supermoon. When it's conjunct Lilith right now, so it's not conjunct, but Lilith is close to the moon, so the moon's farther out, right? So it's a smaller moon. So in your natal chart, you could see how big the moon is. Is it big, bright? Is it a full moon with Lilith conjunct the sun? That would mean it's a supermoon, right? So your moon's going to be really big and bright, personal, very personal, and bright, illuminated. So it's a strong luminary. Or is it conjunct the moon where it's far and it's new moon? That means like it's far out there and we can't even see it. So it's like no light's coming from the moon, and it's distant, so it's impersonal. So your moon is not going to, it's, you know, being a new moon, it's going to have its own influence. It's going to, you know, strongly influence the sign it's in and house, whatever, but it's not going to have much of an influence on its own, or less influence, right? More spiritual, less physical, less material, right? So that's how you could interpret Lilith. What else? The nodes. I didn't talk about the nodes. The nodes are not a physical body, but they're very, very important, right? The south node is early life up till 42. We're reliving our south node. But then after 42, primarily, it's gradual, but 42 is like the midpoint, the cutoff. For north node takes over. And north node is where we are undeveloped, but we need to develop. And so there's tremendous hunger to develop that area. So, you know, in my example, I have north node in the first house. When I was younger, I had tons of friends. I mean, south node's in the seventh house. You know, I had Mercury, Jupiter here, tons of friends, girlfriends, teachers, things like that, because Jupiter and whatnot. Very social. Then, you know, north node in the first, it's much more about developing myself and my name, my identity, my individuality. But it also shows that the house where north node is in is undeveloped. So I have to be very careful. Even still, I'm 47. So I'm like past the cutoff date, but even still, I have to be very careful who I spend time with, because if my ascendant's not very well developed, that means I'm influential. So even though I have retrogrades, I have Uranus retrograde on the ascendant, Pluto retrograde in the 12th, Neptune retrograde in the second, I'm very resistant, but at the same time, I do have a susceptibility where I can soak up another person's energy, because my own identity is not fully developed. Wherever you have north node, especially if you're not like 80, 90 years old, you haven't had decades to really develop that area, you're going to be open. You're going to be susceptible in that area, right? So let's say my north node's in the seventh in my natal chart, let's say, for example, like this one. my relationships would be very susceptible. It would be opposite, right? I don't have good relationship skills. I'm not adept at relationships. And, relationships in a similar way would be very, um, influential in my life because I just don't know how to relate to people very well. In the 10th house, there could be this incredible pull towards public image and career and stuff like that. At the same time, I'm going to be not very strong in that area, and easily influenced by other people, not really know how to not have firm footing, not know how to make myself um, grow in that area. But at the same time, I'm like hungry for that. So the North Node is like this endless hunger. So that's how you look at it. An area that we need to grow in. We're not developed yet, but we're very hungry for. In South Node, we're very developed and satiated, and we're detached because of it, right? So if you have South Node in the first house, you're over age 42, you're just not very interested in yourself. You're really interested in others, obsessively so. But you're very firm in yourself. You're not worried, like you have your identity. You have your very strong sense of personal identity with South Node in the first house, right? So wherever your South Node is, you graduated, at least in this life. For now, you're fully satisfied, fully developed. You graduated high school, graduated college, whatever. You have a degree in that sign, that house, right? You know it, and you're kind of detached from it. You can use it, and you probably will use it to advance yourself, but it's not an area where you're hungry for or you need to really seek out. It's just sort of tool bag. You got your college diploma, you hang it up on your wall, and you're like, look, I got my degree. I'm not going back to college, but I use it all the time. That's what your South Node is. It's your college diploma. And it's also your detachment. You can draw from it, but you're not going back to college, right? So I think I covered all the main well, all right. So just briefly, we'll look at aspects. Trines are great. So trines are very passionate and physical and talented, right? They're very fiery, but also skillful. They show skills and talents and ease of communication. Sextiles are very similar, but they're they have more intellectual quality, slightly more aerated, right? And skills and talents, but more intellectual, you could say. Squares make you work hard, and if you don't work hard in that area, life challenges you. That gives you, makes you work hard, right? Inconjuncts are imbalances of power. Here, this one, yeah. Pluto, Pluto Vesta has an inconjunct. Imbalances of power. One side wants to overcome the other, and there's a struggle. One side is subservient, but then they might be challenged by that side. So it could be like a seesaw. And the side that has more power is the side that's on the 8th side. So here, so Vesta would be on the 6th side, because if you like opposite Pluto is Cancer, then one below, that's 6. So Vesta is 6th from Pluto. Pluto's 8th from Vesta. So Pluto is in the dominant position. Pluto is also the dominant planet between the two, right? So Pluto is really like having its way with Vesta. Pluto is just manhandling the crap out of Vesta. It's like slapping it around, making Vesta its bitch. Vesta doesn't like it, but it really is not strong enough to stand up to Pluto. If it were Mars, Pluto would do that sometimes, and Mars would, get, angry and aggressive and challenge it back. Or if it's the Sun, forget it. The Sun's the king. It's gonna have its, it's gonna be a real power struggle there. Or Saturn, right? Or Jupiter, Anyways, yeah. So those are the main ones. Septile is another one which we could look at. I'm going to do a whole video on the harmonic aspects, the lesser known ones. So wait for that. I think that's pretty much everything. I mean, there's so much. It's not everything. This is just the taste. I don't know what else I want to talk about right now. I've been liking Part of Fortune lately. It seems to be pretty good. Again, it's not a planet. It's just an indicator of where you might be fortunate in your life. So yeah. So I think that's it for now, guys. Don't want to make this video too long. I know I can be long-winded sometimes. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, share, book a reading with me. You know, I want to promote this. I think everyone should get a reading because I'm good at what I do. This is what I do, and I'm not good at a lot of things. In fact, I spent most of my life trying to be anything but an astrologer, because I just didn't have, again, that resistance, that negative conditioning. I just didn't think I was qualified to be an astrologer, or I wanted to see what else I could do. I knew I could do astrology. In any case, I'm good at what I do. I give excellent readings. People are happy, and I help people with the readings. Like, I really help. I look at I know what you need, and I can help you in ways that you can't help yourself most of the time. So book a reading with me. Macroastrology.com is my website. Macrogoalmachine@yahoo.com is my email. And hit that like button. That's it for now. Mediocre astrologer signing off. Meh, he's okay.